Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hi, folks. Thanks, as always, for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. I really appreciate you being with me here and for taking the extra step to share the podcast with others. I do get such lovely feedback from people, and I can't tell you how much it means to me that these conversations resonate with you. They certainly do with me, and that's why I love chatting with these bold women and sharing their stories. There's just so much here that I get out of it, and I love sharing it. I don't think you can listen to today's conversation and not be affected, changed, or inspired on some level. It's very likely that you'll make different decisions today and going forward after you listen to today's episode. This conversation is with Helen Thayer. Now, I've known of Helen for, maybe 20 years, maybe more. She's been on my radar for such a long time because some of the really amazing things that she's accomplished. And even though she lives in the Seattle area and we've been in touch over the years, like via email, I'm fairly certain this was the first time we met in person. But our sit down was like slipping into a conversation with an old friend, someone with whom I have common interests and on the same wavelength with, but also someone whom I really admire and can look to for inspiration. So who's Helen Thayer? Though she's not a fan of promoting herself as the quote-unquote first person to do this or that, there's no denying her accomplishments. At age 50, she was the first woman to travel solo to the magnetic North Pole in an unsupported expedition. And that means she pulled all of her own supplies and gear. She ventured solo to the South Pole on a trek where she had to abandon the trip just shy of completing the journey. Along with her husband, Bill, she walked across the Sahara on a 4,000-mile trade route. And it's also where she had to be led by a local through 600 miles of landmines. She walked 1,600 miles across the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. She kayaked 2,200 miles in the Amazon, and beginning on her 80th birthday, she walked across Death Valley. And in this conversation, she shares some really great stories from that very recent trip. She was named one of the great explorers of the 20th century by the National Geographic Society. And after you hear this conversation, you will know why she gets to be in that wonderful club of folks. Helen was influenced by not only her very athletic parents, but by Sir Edmund Hillary, Ed, as she calls him. And though most of us don't have those kinds of people surrounding us and influencing us, we do have Helen. She's now 81, and as you'll hear, she has many more projects ahead of her that keep her going and excited. Now, I could go on about Helen and her accomplishments, but I'd rather this conversation with her speak for itself. Before we get to that, I want to give a shout out to a few new Patreon supporters. We have Denise, Chris, and Nancy. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining our small but growing community. As a supporter of the show, patrons have access to bonus content that includes a question I ask of the guest after we finish our main recording. Now, in the case of Helen, Patreon supporters will hear what happened to her after falling into a crevasse on her way to the South Pole when she, as she says, she smashed her hip. As a supporter, you can also join a private Facebook group where I give you a heads up on guests with the opportunity to ask questions of them. And also in that group, there's just some general sharing that's going on. Again, this bonus content is only for Patreon supporters, and really you can support the show for as little as $1 a month. Other ways you can support the show: leave a review or a rating, share this episode with a friend, put it on social media, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss future shows. Okay, with that, please enjoy this amazing conversation with Helen Thayer.
Because it was 7.5 months to get across the Sahara, and then it was. In fact, I'm starting to write that book now. when we came back from that, I said to Bill, I never want to speak of this expedition again, and I will never write of it. I'll never look at a photo. And he said, ditto, same. And because it was such a horrendous experience.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that was in 96 into 97.
Wow.
And
so it's taken that much time. You've had to have that much distance from it. What changed that you want to look back and...
Because it's smoothed out, and you grow older and you look back at it with it in a different light. We were kidnapped, and we stood side by side, and there was a gun to our head pressing into the temples to be shot. And we were just seconds away from being shot. And, to go through that. And then we were robbed 3 times as we went. The last time only 8 days from the finish. And we had to walk through 600 miles of minefields. And so it was...
In what country was that?
Well, it's the minefields, there was an accumulation of 600 miles because that if one country doesn't like the neighbour, they just mine the border. And it's worse now. It's just and the horrific effects of mines is just everywhere. So we had to get through that and find a way to get through them.
So specifically, which countries, in the bordering countries, where did you find that then?
Chad and Niger, Sudan were probably the worst, but we're almost shot in Algeria. So I have to say all 7, going all the way across. There was danger everywhere.
How did you get out of that situation where you were almost shot?
Well, Bill, he's a very quick thinker, and he asked them for permission to take out his GPS out of his pocket. He said, I'd like to be able to hold it. This is a gift from Helen, and I'd like to be holding it in my hand, as I die. And I'm standing saying, he's going crazy.
That's pretty clever.
That's no gift from me. I've never heard this story before. Anyway, so then he pretended to punch in a message on the keypad. Then he told them, well, I've just sent a message to our base camp. There'll be a helicopter. He's a helicopter pilot. Helicopter out in under 5 minutes, and I've described you and the number on that vehicle. Well, they threw everything off that truck and took off as fast as they could. They believed him.
They cared about... a lot of times terrorists don't care about being caught, but they did. Cared.
And they didn't realize that a GPS... It only receives, it doesn't
talk.
No. It's like, and they disappeared. And I go, how in the world did you ever think of that? He said, I have no idea. It just came into my mind.
Oh, yeah. When you're pressed, huh? You get creative.
So that helped out there. And then to get through the minefields, we'd have to find somebody, a local tribesman who had been employed to lay the mines in that area or help lay the mines in that area. So they know that's very narrow path going through. And so the idea is you give them, okay, we'll pay you so much, we'll give you 50% now, and you'll get the other half when we're through. You walk 100 feet ahead of us at all times. And if the answer is, well, no, out of respect to you, this one guy said, oh, no, out of respect to you, you're white people, I have to be I should always walk behind you. Yeah. Yeah, give us that 50%, goodbye. So, it's a matter of tactics. And of course, the camels are very good, they walk like this. So you can take a narrow path, but you make sure you're walking.
Were you on camel at that point?
No, we walked. We walked every inch. Our camels carried the water and the food and equipment.
How were they detecting the landmines?
If you can get somebody who's been employed to lay them,
they know where they are.
They know and they know the path through them. There's always a path through somewhere. It has to be, because they have to come back and forth, we discovered. And so you find that person who was, one of the many who were employed, and they know they know how to get through. And they walk 100 feet ahead of you. So if they blow up, well, that was the wrong direction. And you know that if they're going to walk 100 feet ahead of you, they know. So it's a matter of tactics. And it was very tense, very difficult.
So that was 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, 96 into the fall of 96 winter, and then spring of 97.
So 22 years ago. And
because I went down to the Antarctic at the end of 97.
And you're finally feeling like there's enough distance that you can that you're okay to dive into.
Yeah, especially now that Bill is gone, I want, I want to keep his legacy alive, and he was such an important part of this, and so I need to tell the story.
Before we move on, if you're comfortable with it, do you mind talking about Bill a little bit? You said that he had passed away about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, 2.5 years ago, yes.
He had been with you on many of your journeys. I know you've done some solo journeys,
but
first, he'd also...
I soloed the magnetic North Pole at age 50 in 1988, and then 4 years later he and I did the same journey, pulling our sleds unresupplied and so forth to celebrate our 30th anniversary. Some people have some people have a nice dinner downtown.
Exactly.
Seattle.
And you know what? It's a lot cheaper to have a dinner downtown.
It is much cheaper. We discovered that. We don't have to worry about polar bears walking around after you either.
Yeah.
And so, and putting you on their menu. But we just wanted to experience, because we did everything together, and he had retired from flying. And so now we're into Adventure Classroom, and he was working on that as well. So we did that, and then that set us off to do these things, these expeditions together. And he's at least 50% of the team. So that's why I want to write the book on the Sahara now. It'll be a long story, because it was 7.5 months of hell most of the time, interspersed with very short moments of pleasure. When you found that well.
Didn't you ever think, if it was that hellacious, did you ever think of just stopping it and turning back? Or?
No, we felt, of course, in some places you're committed, you're out in the middle of nowhere, well, you can't go forward. And, to go back, you're going to travel the same distance through what we just went through. No, thank you. We go forward and see if it gets any better.
Yeah. What was so hellacious about it? Other than, I know you described some terrible things, but that couldn't have been the majority of it.
The constant need to be aware of the people you encounter, because our skins are distressingly white under those circumstances. You're far too white.
Or red.
You wish
you've been sunburned.
Yeah. Well, we did like the Arabs do. We were covered. Even had gloves on all the time.
Like kind of the full robe kind of thing?
No, they were Western clothes, pants like this, and shirts, but done up and here, and even sometimes white gloves to stop our hands from being sunburned. Well, it's very cold. It can drop 50 and 60 degrees at night. And then there are the windstorms, sandstorms, and in the morning sometimes it's so cold, and that wind, just blasting away at you, and you're constantly hitting into that. And the need to always find that well, hoping and praying that the well is where the map says, it's not full of sand, or it simply doesn't exist.
Did that happen? Dry. Did that happen often?
Yes, we had to make sure we always had 3 days of water in reserve, and then it was just a continuous. I think it was the continuous stress, day after day after day.
What were the temperatures like?
Oh, well, then it varied. We started off like in the 90s, and then it dropped down in the winter, and then in the spring, by the time we were finishing, it was getting pretty hot. Way up in the 90s again, close to 100 by the time we finished.
That's not too bad.
No, not for deserts, although it's uncomfortable. It's hot.
No,
you get used to it to some extent.
You were in the Gobi, and it was what? I think I read it was 126 or something?
Yeah, got up to 126.
And thank you for using Fahrenheit and not Celsius.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I'm in a Fahrenheit country. Why am I going to talk Celsius and confuse everybody, including myself?
Yeah.
Because I have to look it up on the charts.
Right.
So why... Please give me a break here.
Yeah.
So I like to make my writing so that people don't need a dictionary at their side, and they don't need to have charts of various technicalities at their side. Just take them with me on my journey.
Meters and kilometers and Celsius, and it's also.
Some people do that in order to make it look as though they're learned. But whatever they might think of me, I just don't do that. I'm just a simple country girl.
Yeah. And by the way, you live in a beautiful place here with I've positioned myself here as we're sitting talking that I'm looking out at 3 mountains in an incredible view in Snohomish, in the Snohomish County area.
Quiet, peaceful.
Unbelievable.
I can leave the cares of the world. I don't even have to turn on the news if I don't want to.
Do you?
Sometimes I do. Yeah. I like to keep up on the news and know what's going on, but if they get... I turn on a channel this morning, and goodness, there were 3 people all trying to talk at once, and no, we don't. No, that's what I'm not here to listen. Just turn the channel. I have that privilege of there's an off switch and there's a turn the channel. So I feel that I don't have to listen to that. If it gets too negative and if I don't like what they're saying, I don't have to hear you. So,
are you online much? Do you spend time on your laptop? Do you read the news on your laptop or anything?
I really don't, because I'm on the computer a lot, but it's for doing things with my writing and Photoshop. I check my email a few times a day when I'm home and see the message, because I'm a public speaker, so I'm getting those sorts of things. And so in my office, I'm really busy. In fact, my office is actually, people would wonder, how in the world do you operate in here? It's I've got my speaking business in there, an adventure classroom, the photography and the writing. Is like, I know where everything is. Other people might not, but I do. So that's what I work with. But it's no, I don't even want to really have time to be online watching the news and watching the gossip.
Well, that's what so much of the news is, right? It's just it's guised as news, but it's really just entertainment and gossip.
Yes, and they become very over dramatic, and I'm very much a realist. I've had to face death a few times, and I'm very much a realist, and it's like, no, I don't care about your drama. Just tell me the facts as they really are, and then go away. I have other things to do. I don't have time to sit around listening to your drama. And then, exaggeration. No, we don't need that. But it is what it is, and I understand it's there because a lot of people must like it, and I'm sure I'm in the minority, and that's okay. I just turn it off and go do what I want to do.
Well, I'm with you on that. I don't keep up with the news because it angers me so much. It gets me riled up, and I think I have better things to do with my energy.
And then it's sad. I came back from Joshua Tree just there, and they said, "Oh, did you hear about the crane killing people? Crane, what crane and where?" But then that was sad. And I almost wish I didn't know. But then, of course, you need to know some things. I like to keep the part of the news I would like if they could just give me the world news, what is going on in the various countries, because I'm interested in global stuff, and I like to keep informed. I don't need to know today's 6 murders in some city, and I don't need to know that. It is good for us to understand that there are mass killings around us. I think it's good. We need to. The reality of today's society is there are some things we need to know about it, but we shouldn't dwell. I don't feel that I want to dwell on it. It's sad and it's upsetting to know this is going on, that people are suffering in such a manner, and you think of the families and the damage it does. It's dreadful, but then it starts eating into your soul. There's so much of it. And
just to get back to the crane thing, just to explain to listeners in case they missed it, a construction crane toppled in downtown Seattle, and killed 4 people, 2 workers and 2 people on the ground, which is incredibly sad.
Oh, it's terribly sad.
Yeah.
And the families, I think of the families, and it's just, I'm on the board of the Washington State Police Foundation, Chaplaincy, and you think of the families, and so many people are affected. It's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
So
How often
sad.
do you get called out for that? Because I read a little bit about that it's an organization.
Yeah,
where
I don't actually get called out. I'm on the board, an advisory board, and I really enjoy my association. It's a Christian organisation of chaplains, and I really enjoy just the work that they do, and because I truly believe that we should help each other.
But it's also a secular organization.
Yes.
And the idea is that if there's a disaster,
yes,
that they will come out and help the family.
Exactly, and sit with the family. I've actually gone on my own. There was a suicide not too long ago, and I sat with them throughout the night because they were so distressed, and it was so difficult. And, that family I found, I wasn't called out because of the board. I was called privately and went out on it, and all they needed was my ears they just had to talk and talk and talk and talk, say the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And which
just
is all
have
right.
somebody listen. Yeah.
It's all right. That's all right. That's what I went for. I know them, and they called me and just needed someone to. I think that it's good for us to be available to help each other through hard times.
Absolutely agreed. And I think there's a false sense of connection when we are so quote unquote connected with social media and email
and that's not
texting, and it's not connecting.
It's not personal. No,
it's not.
That's a super, in my opinion, and I know many would disagree because, they even become addicted to it, but walking around with a cell phone in your hand, you cannot put it down. As my husband used to say, I think they're going to need surgery to remove that thing from their hand. It's a habit, constantly being online with various things. No, that's not me. Now, I understand it is for many people, so I'm not condemning that. I'm just saying it's not for me. I think that to be available in times of need and just caring about that other guy, and that's why I get so upset when I hear of these killings. The person is gone, but I think of the family. What are they going through? The heartache and the sadness and the not being able to sleep and all that. That's what I think, and that upsets me greatly, which is why if I have a friend who's in need, I'm there for however long they need me.
So you're from New Zealand.
Yes.
You have a beautiful accent.
Thank
Still,
you.
after how many years in the U.S.?
I came here permanently in 1965.
A long time.
Yes.
Do you work on keeping your accent?
No, I never think about
it.
It's only when other people tell me about it that I'm reminded that I have one at all.
That you sound different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Although it's funny when I hear myself on broadcast at all, it's like, good grief. Is that really me? Do I really sound like that?
Yeah, and we're all charmed by it too. That's the thing.
Well, that helps me because I'm not necessarily charmed by it.
Yeah.
But so it's good for other people to tell me so that I don't feel bad about myself.
No, believe me, we're all charmed by it. So what I'm thinking here is that as a Kiwi, you have a little bit different perspective on things, including the way that you look at the news and the way that you respond to things too, because I think we've just grown up in I don't know if it's a little bit more anesthetized, but we don't.
Very busy.
Yeah, we're very
stressful.
Busy. We're very distracted. Very distracted.
And stressed. When I go back to New Zealand, it's like I can take a deep breath and I can sit back. I don't have to race through life anymore. It's a much slower pace. I meet someone on the street and it's okay to stand there for an hour just chatting away. You've got all the time. And so, but then when I come back to the United States, I have to be careful because I can't do that because you become a nuisance to people because they don't have time. There's just not that time. But Americans' society has become very busy. I'm always amazed. I do know some families who have children, say, in high school. And this is not just one family; it's several of them. But the children are in everything. They're in two or three
soccer
sports
and piano, and yeah.
And so now here is one child having to be taken to this, and the other child having to be taken there, and then they're racing about, and there's never time to sit down and just time to just pack up the car and go to the beach for the day and just hang out together. There's no time for that because and then they say, well, we have to do it like this so that the kids don't get into trouble. And I think, well, what are they learning about their lifestyle? What will they pass on to their children? What lifestyle will they pass on to their children? It'll be even busier because each generation gets more of whatever. And that puzzles me. I think that, but society is what it is. We as an individual, I can't stop American society from racing through life full of stress and schedules that are beyond belief. But I can live my life here, which is why I like to live right where I am. Bill and I this was our oasis together. Quiet, peaceful, beautiful view. We have our 12-acre farm and lots of animals, a donkey and goats and chickens and 5 rescued dogs and 2 rescued cats.
But that sounds over the top to me. I mean, that sounds like a lot. So what I'm hearing are kind of two different things here. And I think I have a bunch of questions. So on the one hand, on some level, you do feel being swept up in the American society because you say you feel different when you go to New Zealand. You can just relax and you can spend time with people. So you must get caught up in it
to some degree. Sometimes, yes,
in some kind of unconscious fashion. It's just because it's
to keep up with what people expect of me.
But also, having a home here, having the dogs, having the cats, being busy, doing all the projects and the books, there must be some element of you that is comfortable in that kind of a environment.
Well, I've always been a person who's 6 projects behind, and people would call that stress, I suppose.
Yeah, I would.
But to me, that's not stress because I so look forward to the Adventure Classroom project I'm putting together on the national parks. And that's going to take planning and getting on with the job and the research, the photography, putting them together into programs, writing a book on each park, go and then do to the next one. In the meantime, I'm writing the Sahara, a book which I'm getting into and really enjoying reliving that now. And because I love to write. And I love photography and I work on Photoshop and that sort of thing and bringing all of that together. And my public speaking, I enjoy audiences. I have a good time. Audiences are my friend. I just love to be there. It's just like I figure, if they love me, they love me. If they don't, they don't. But so far, nobody's thrown rotten tomatoes or eggs at me, so I've done okay. And I enjoy that. And I enjoy something is happening to me now. Since I turned 80, I'm 81 now, and I'm finding that I'm becoming more useful to society as a motivational tool. People are looking at me now, and see, I don't want people to put me on a pedestal because nobody belongs on a pedestal. I do not belong there. I'm a normal person made the same as everybody else. I just chose my goals and my way of life very early on in life, and in my way of doing things, charge ahead, full steam ahead, and on all cylinders at all times. But now I'm finding that people are looking at me and saying, "Oh, at your age, you're doing this, and you keep yourself, in a physical condition and so forth." Well, we can probably do that as well, especially now that there's a movement in the senior population to be healthier and fitter. And
is there? Do you find that there's that talk?
Well, a few years ago, Bill and I felt that was coming on quite strongly in this country, but in the last 4 or 5 years, I think what we've seen and what I see now is that people are drifting back into the overweight because, and I don't know if this theory is correct or not, but on TV, if you notice the ads, many overweight, obviously not fit people are doing the ads now, which means that is taken by American society as being normal.
That it's acceptable.
Whereas it wasn't that way 5 years ago. And now that appears to be acceptable to me, and I see among my audiences the things that people say and the questions they ask me, it appears to me to be sliding backwards.
I wonder if part of that is people trying to be politically correct. And there's this whole thing about not fat shaming people. If you're overweight, don't fat shame. So people are embracing their weight. If they are overweight, they're embracing it. And they're saying that there's nothing wrong with it. And I wonder if that is part of the backlash. It's not, I think maybe they're trying to show on the television programs and in the advertising that, hey, we're acknowledging and we are also embracing this part of the community that we ignored before because,
And we shouldn't be shaming them.
No.
We should be encouraging them rather than shaming. Shame and bully is not the way to go. Encouragement and just reach out in love and encouragement and say, can I help? But we're seeing it, especially lately, it just seems to be that is what you see anymore. And now it's almost, if you're not overweight, you're a bit abnormal. Go to the grocery store. In the summertime especially, when people dress a little less, what might we say, not quite so many clothes on.
Right, sure.
And so, you feel in the minority all at once. In fact, overseas, Bill and I have been told, oh, you're American. Oh, you don't look like American because you're not fat. Because he was as thin as a pencil. And so... and never gained a pound in his life. Yeah, it's different. But now I find that people are really talking to me about my fitness program, and to gain any encouragement from what I do as they might apply. When they can see that I'm the first person to walk the length of Death Valley and things like that. Firsts are not particularly important in my world, but it was. And
well, it's what gains attention too. It's an easy thing to talk about.
If you do something first, okay, then if I can use that to encourage other people, then it's okay. But to stand up on your pedestal and say I was first, just to be first, is such a meaningless thing to me, anyway.
Well, it's an easier catch phrase to say if you
and
are
people are inventing so many things to be first anymore.
They are.
It's amazing. I mean, if you have a hangnail, I'm the first person to ski to the South Pole with a hangnail. It's getting a little bit much.
I'll take note of that, and I'll put that in the introduction about yourself, the hangnail. So, growing up in New Zealand, you actually got started in a very adventurous life very early. Your parents were mountaineers, is that right? And they took you out.
Athletes.
And athletes. So can you talk about that early time?
Also my family were close friends with Ed Hillary, Sir Edmund Hillary. In New Zealand, he's just Ed. Nobody calls him Sir Edmund. That would be so presumptuous. That is not the Kiwi way of doing anything. The Kiwi way of doing things, they don't believe in building you up too much. You might get a big head, and that is not considered very polite.
Well, that's the tall poppy syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Where if you're the tall poppy, you get chopped down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they will. Yeah. You don't start presuming that you're important at all, or you'll get chopped down, or they'll let you know. Which I think is okay, because you don't want to get too carried away with yourself.
Well, does that prevent you, and I'm using a generic you, does that prevent you from wanting to do things that are big? Like here in the United States, you're rewarded for doing big things.
Well, New Zealanders are, generally speaking, a pretty adventuresome bunch. You'll find them in some of the most remote corners of the world doing the oddest things. So they're very outdoor, pretty rugged individuals, like the Australians. They're our cousins across the ditch. We call the Tasman Sea the ditch. It's 1,200 miles wide, but and so they're like the understatement, and the down under, we call it 1,200 miles is the ditch. And so it's pretty typical of both cultures. But
so as a Kiwi, you'll do things, you just won't boast about it.
No, it's very rude to they call it bragging. Oh no, it would be considered very rude. I've found it very difficult here after I skied to the magnetic North Pole alone to sort of get into that thing of being first and you're this and you're that. It was hard, but you sort of you get into the culture and it's okay. But it's but I started. Finally, my parents told me I could start climbing with them when I was 9. And it was Mount Taranaki. It was Mount Egmont then, just over 8,000 feet high.
Was that in New Zealand?
Yes, in the North Island, the centre of the North Island of New Zealand. And that was a struggle. The 9-year-old legs really wore out, but I did get up there because my father kept saying, it's one step at a time. My mother said, keep visualizing yourself standing on the summit and you'll make it.
Did you do any training, or had you been hiking before that?
Oh, yeah, I was out hiking a lot with my parents. Plus, we had a 10,000-acre farm. I was a farm girl through and through. And my parents were both athletes, so I was used to the up in the morning. I was already... I have at 9 years old, I joined the local track club at 5 years old, which you can do in New Zealand. There's a very big, very widespread, very, very well populated club system. And you can join the local track club when you're 5. So I won my first race when I was 5. It was 50 yards and I got a cup. I thought I was just the most amazing person in the world.
Until you learned you had to be humble about it.
Yes. Well, my mother put me straight there. I bet. She said, I can remember her saying, I do not want you to tell anybody else about that again unless they ask you.
Interesting.
And if you're asked, you may speak about it. But in the meantime, don't keep bringing the subject up. You're talking about yourself too much.
Oh, goodness. Isn't this so different than the way that we're brought up?
And so I learnt my lesson that Mother would not approve of too much bragging around. It wasn't going to work in this household. So then finally when I was 9, okay, you can start climbing, and then just took off from then. And Ed came out and he came with us, and also then later on he said, well, if you're going to climb, you're going to do it right. And Ed, being Ed, just said, Harry, he's an amazing man, just one of my childhood mentors, an amazing man. He said, if you're going to climb, you're going to do it right. And that was my parents' concept of things too. If you're going to do anything right, so you've got to do it right and do it well. So that started that off, and but I was into sports and music. I was a violinist, and then into sports, and just very outdoor all the time. I was actually more interested in outdoors and sports and studies, but I was reminded by parents that that's not going to work either.
So were you always, throughout those years in New Zealand and then even in the U.S., were you always hiking, or you were doing other sports and other activities?
I represented New Zealand in the Empire or Commonwealth Games now as a discus thrower, 5'3" discus thrower.
How did you get into discus throwing?
I decided that's what I wanted to do, and that was that. And everybody said, you can't do that. And that's no reason. I mean, just because you say I can't do it, there's no reason why I can't. Because if I want to, that's what I will do. I will find a way.
What was the driving force that made you want to be a discus thrower?
Well, I saw them throw this thing, and I was running at the time and doing hurdling, and I was getting a tad bored with just going around and around a track, leaping over things. And so I saw that, and I thought, there's some real beauty in that. The javelin throw impressed me too. The shot put, not so much. It was like throw it and then thud, it hits the ground. That didn't impress me as much. But the javelin was beautiful, and the discus, as it floated through the air.
And the disc, you have to go around. You have to turn your body in a
twice
circle,
around
don't
in
you?
a circle,
and then throw it.
And you have to be quick and strong. And I figured, I've got the speed, and I've got the strength, and I've got the determination, and I have a very good sense of balance. And I was told that was very important. So I thought, well, there's no, but the only thing lacking is height. Well, I won't worry about that. I've got very long arms, so I'll just figure that one out too. So, because I have the attitude, if I want to do something, and if it's difficult, well, I'll just figure out, I'll find a way. It's like skiing to the magnetic North Pole. People said, you can't do that. When I looked for a sponsorship, they laughed at me. They said, oh, you're a woman. Well, that wasn't very surprising. I was 50 years old. I figured that out. And they told me you can't go alone. Well, I don't know why. And then, and they're very insulting, really. So
who was this when you say they? Who?
Corporate America, the big CEOs and their leather chairs, men.
Okay.
And looking at me in a way that, just as though I was inferior, and I was crazy to think of doing such a thing. But all the sports and, the hiking, the climbing, I loved mountain climbing, and that was my first love, even over the sports. But I was successful in the sports. I was a school sports captain and so forth and so forth. I did well at sports because it came natural to me because of my parents.
You'd been active all your life.
Yeah,
right?
My parents were born athletes. So my mother was a champion tennis player. My father was a goalkeeper on the soccer team. So, it was just normal, sort of a normal lifestyle for me. And I don't consider it anything special that I was very successful in sports just because it was just the way I was born. And so then it came to, I was climbing in Tajikistan, peak communism, and I reached the summit. It was a good summit day, and I looked all around, and I could see China on one side and Afghanistan on the other, and it was just an amazing experience. And I realized after all of these years of sports and I had represented 3 countries by that time in sports. New Zealand, the country of my birth, Guatemala, where I lived because Bill was flying there. We became permanent residents. And then the United States, I represented the United States. And then I was United States national luge champion. And then what else?
This was all in different years. You weren't able to represent them within a short time period.
No, over a long period of time. As I moved from one country to another, and then from one sport to another, and I decided I would like to become the United States national luge champion. Oh dear. Anyway, I did that. I gave myself 2 years and I made it.
Did you have luge experience?
Nothing.
Or you just thought, I want to do that?
Now, Bill and I saw it on TV and we said, hey, why don't we go back to New York and see if we can do that? So we both made the team, he on the men and me on the women's, and he was an outstanding luger in Europe. He won medals and we were on the team. And
well, it sounds like he had the body type for it.
Yeah,
like
he was very good.
Tall and thin.
Yeah, and I was just right because being short, you can scoot around those corners really well, and fast. And so, fast reaction. And so anyway, then he gave that up because he was still flying. He said, I need 2 feet and 2 hands to fly this. I'm going to lose him in this sport. It's so dangerous. So I said, okay, I'll give myself 2 years to win that championship, and then I'm out. And I did it. And then I moved on. And
that to me is so crazy. Like who?
Well, I had it figured out. You see, if you want to do something, you just got to figure it out. And so I figured, all right, I'm going to be competing against women who have been doing this for at least 10 years. And their technique was beautiful. And they'd been coached and they knew what they were doing. I went there, I really didn't know what I was doing. And my technique was not there because I hadn't had time, I wasn't in it long enough to learn because it's a technical sport. And so, especially if you like to stay alive, And so, but I thought, my body is tough and I'm strong and I'm fast. I have very fast reactions. I have a good sense of balance and I'm short and I'm very strong. Okay, I know I can do this. As long as I'm willing to take the bumps and the crashes, I know I can do this. In practice, I'm going to crash and bash more than the others, but if I just kiss that off and move on, I could do this. So that's what happened. I did. I took my share of crashes. Oh, my goodness gracious, I did. But I got it right, and then it came time I was on the team, went to Europe and raced there, and then came back, and then I raced the national championships, and I won. So it worked. The plan worked.
The plan did
because I figured out how to do it. Because that's what's wrong with a lot of people. They go, that's too hard. No. You figure it out. It's like when I skied to the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole. I figured it out. How am I going to get around? You see, I was really a pioneer of sorts because there was no sled available. I had to get a Boeing engineer design one for me, then find people with the right material to put it together so it would hold together at low temperature. I had to figure out that, no, you can't take anything that's waterproof because you develop ice on the inside. And then all this stuff. That's why it took me 2 years to plan it because I had to have everything right before I took that first step because I learned at a very early age, if you don't plan, you can set your goal, but if you don't plan well, you're not going to make it. You need to plan, figure it out. So I had to, I just simply had to get the sled. There was nothing available. There was no information really available. Nothing really available on how to deal with polar bears, not really. I was walking through a store that sells all sorts of maritime equipment, and I saw this flare gun. I thought, by golly, there's my answer. So I bought 2 kinds to see which one I'd want, and I bought these flares, and I brought them home. The first one about ripped my finger off. That's not the one I need.
Did you test it out?
I did. And wow, this thing isn't going to work. I took my finger off with the ring, just. So anyway, I went to and the other one was perfect. It was like a pistol action. And so that was what I used for the polar bears, plus the dog that I took with me. He walked at my side, Charlie, and there's this photo up there on the wall. But I figured it out. And then off I went, and of course people who saw me off, I felt as I was attending my own funeral. People were really, many of them thought they'd never see me again, many of my friends. And
I've done trips like that
yes.
where I describe it as people hugging me thinking it's for the last time.
Yeah, that's what was happening to me. I was attending my own funeral, and it was very odd. But anyway, I knew I had things in hand. I had the polar bears figured out as much as I could without actually, living among them. And I went north. I lived with the Inuit people for about 3 months, so that they could teach me things about these polar bears. And again, what is it? I'm not going to be walking on land. What's it going to be like walking across part of the Arctic Ocean and things like that? And so I went north. That was part of my planning, and find out from the Masters of Arctic Survival where better can I find the information. So I did that. And then I...
Was Bill with you then?
No, he was flying at that time. And he didn't retire until after this. And so I got it all together, and then I set off and plodded my way along and went through the trials and tribulations of getting there. You see, in those days, when Bill and I were doing things that were first, they were things that had not, people had done. We didn't have to invent things to say we're first. It was just a straight out, no woman has done this before, period, and so forth. But when I look back on it now, I realize the huge value in that journey. It was so valuable to me that, yes, I was a pioneer. I had to invent, and design equipment that didn't exist, figure out what will work, what sort of sled, what sort of runners will slide as I pull that sled behind me, what sort of runners will slide over the ice most easily. And so I was getting advice from people, asking questions, and then walking through that maritime store and seeing that flare gun. Nobody had, I was the first one up to that point to use flares in that manner. Other expeditions later took them, and it was rather noticeable to me that, the people have cottoned on to, they read the book.
Have you seen the movie Arctic?
Yes.
You've seen it.
Yes.
It just came out, I think. We just watched it a couple of nights ago.
Yes, I went with friends.
And I didn't realize it was even in the movies. I hadn't heard of it, but we rented it at home, and that's what he uses is the flares to get rid of the polar bears.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because there were some people up there who they used these rubber bullets, but it just annoys the polar bears to hit them with a rubber bullet, and they weren't using flares either. But it worked for me with my dog. But to be a pioneer and to go out and do something that no one has come anywhere near doing, and having to figure it out on how to do it. Now, of course, it'd be very different too again because of the lack of ice. But that's what I had a company a little while ago offer to send me to the South Pole. They would pay for everything for me to ski. Well, when I was 60, I got to within 4 miles of it before I went into a crevasse and got myself out, but it was a terrible accident. And then I continued on with the idea, if somehow I can get so I can see in the far distance any specks on the horizon, because of Great Big Station, it's really not. It's a whole different story than the North. It's just awful. It's just awful. But anyway, I thought if I could do that, so I struggled on, but finally I got within 4 miles, and I've got the photo of it, and there's all the buildings in front of me, the towers, the whole thing.
You knew how close you were.
Yeah, I was 4 miles away. I had my tent there, took the photo, and they came in and picked me up, and I was so close that they flew me over that little bit before they took me back because I had to be evacuated then, and I did get a new hip out of it. I smashed my hip. And so,
how long did you go on that smashed hip?
Oh, I was another 10 days or so. It was murder. It was murder. It was really bad. But I would never, and the thing too, if I did that now, I would never have gone into the crevasse, because when I went, it was in 1967, and I at the end of the year we finished the Sahara. Then I went at the end of the year to the pole, but it was so
not 67. 1967?
No, 97.
97. Okay,
not
good.
67.
Good. Okay.
Why did I say 67?
Yeah, it's okay.
97.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I thought,
67.
I don't think it happened that long ago. Okay.
Yeah, but, I had the crudest of maps, no information whatsoever on crevasses. Now, if I went, a company offered to send me again, and I just recently, and I said no. I'm not going to be babysat because that's what I would be. You've got to deal with the company A&I. You have charts. You're in constant touch with them. With me, I had an Argos, and I just pressed a release. I just pressed a button every night to say, contact, I'm okay. There was no voice contact. I had no computer with me. I had no media interviews to do every night in the tent, and nothing. I was entirely alone. Now it's not that way at all. I mean, it's so controlled and so organized, and
if you want it to be.
Well, it has to be now.
Well, if you're sponsored.
Well, no, even the way Chris did it, she had to, they went through A&I. You've got to obey the rules. There's very strict rules down there.
Okay.
Very strict, and you've got to have the right insurance for evacuation, which makes sense. But you've got to have the contact and this and that and this, because A&I have this big contract down there, and they are really responsible for no accidents and the whole thing.
I see.
And now, navigation from any route you want to take now, just follow the tracks, because they bicycle to the poles, they drive to the poles in all manner of vehicles, and so you just away you go. And I'm not going to do that. That's not my way of doing it.
You had mentioned, well, this is really funny. You and I have been trying to connect for a long time for the podcast. And I reached out to you, and I'll say, Chris, you mentioned before, Chris Fagan. She was on the podcast. I think she's episode 89, if I'm not mistaken. So listeners can go back and listen to that episode. And she and her husband walked to the South Pole, just to give some context there. So I got this email from you we were trying to connect for quite a while now. And you said, okay, I just walked across Death Valley, right? And I'm told that I'm the first person to do it, and I started it on my 80th birthday, which is just amazing. And it seems to me, just certainly based on what you've just said, is that you are trying to come up with your own adventures so that you're not under necessarily these particular rules. Is that right?
That's right. Now, for those who want to do it that way, that's fine. But for me, now, to go to do the South Pole now, I would have charts to show me where these crevasses are. I'd have every manner of help that I could possibly ever think about. I'd get down to Punta Arenas, and it's all arranged, and you've got facilities now that you can even put your sled in and take care of all of your gear. When I went down there, I found it in a garage with a dirt floor, and it was just entirely different. And nobody had anything to say to me about anything. It was everybody's going around doing their own thing, but now it's very controlled. Because I did go down on I have been down with the Chinese on a experimental thing where they're studying senior age groups in extreme conditions, both in the heat and the cold. And it was refreshing not to be so. That was controlled, but you could sort of, it was more. You were a bit freer. So I don't want to go out there and be so tightly controlled where I've got to have nightly contact with somebody. I've got to do the media thing in the tent. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And because the Antarctica, of course, it's international treaty, and A&I are down there, they're commercial, and they have to obey the rules. And they're responsible for a lot of people. They have guided groups, but even if you go on independent and you're unguided and unresupplied, and you're still very supported because they know where you are all the time.
Well, it's like climbing Mount Everest, right?
Yeah.
Nobody should be up there. Only the elite should. But if you have enough money, you can be guided.
Exactly.
Up.
If you want to spend the money, then those people will.
Yeah.
And if you can overcome the boredom of, that's something that struck me about the Antarctica. I was so bored. I thought, I didn't have to worry about a polar bear. There was nothing going to eat me, nothing going to chase me down. All I had to do is put one ski in front of the other, which, and there are trials and tribulations, I understand. But something else that gets me too is that they keep talking about, the coldest and the windiest continent in the world. Well, come on now, let's have some truth here. You're in the middle of summer. I was overdressed. I had to leave most of my clothes on my sled because I dressed as if I was in the Arctic. Because, you see, then I really didn't have anyone to really advise me.
Yeah.
And I went down there, it's like, my gosh, I was sleeping in my long johns in my tent because you got 24 hours of daylight, and most of it's sunlight. And, of course, you do get the storm and you can get those hellish winds.
Well, what was the temperature like then?
Oh, the temperatures. Bill and I always said we can handle minus 40. Below that, it's getting really uncomfortable. We never got anywhere near that in the Antarctica. We were in the summertime.
Yeah, but what does that mean for me?
Well, summertime, you can get minus 15. You might get minus 25.
Yeah, but that still sounds freezing. I mean, it's literally freezing. But
it is very cold.
Seems really uncomfortable.
But the way they advertise it, it's the coldest, windiest continent in the world.
Uh-huh.
And you think, boy, it's really got to be, they don't. The fact that I can sleep in my long johns in my tent because the tent is so hot because the sun's shining all the time,
Well, I'll keep that in mind when I'm running 150 miles through Antarctica next year, because that's what I'm doing.
Well, that'll be fun.
But it'll be November, so it'll be at the kind of spring start?
Yeah, summer. That'll be warmer. You'll have 24 hours of daylight. And,
okay.
Yeah, and I assume that they'll be supporting you, okay?
Yes and no. I have to carry everything on my back, except for water, which gets replenished.
But there's going to be some kind of communication between
There'll
you
be a group of us.
And where will you be starting from?
I think we do circles, if I'm not mistaken, because it's very controlled down there.
Very.
I think that you're just doing circles.
Yeah, you cannot just simply say, I'm going to go to the South Pole and arrive and start off. There's rules.
Sure.
And
there should be.
Well, it's an international. I can understand why it is the thing. I can understand why it must be that way because it's an international treaty, and it has to be done that way. But I have a choice as to whether I want to do it that way. And it's just, as I said, I would never have gone into that crevasse if I had the information that they have now. It's just very different. But for those who want to do it, it's a challenge, and if you have the money, it's a lot of money. But if you have the money, then it's good.
Right.
It's a challenge. It's a goal. And
there are a lot of people out there now who are kind of making up these adventures, doing them on their own. And it would be interesting for me now, after having this conversation, to kind of go back and pay a little bit more attention to the ones that I've heard of, to see how many of them are, let's say, European, Australian, Kiwis, versus those that are American, because I would just give a guess that the ones who are doing kind of the more creative, off the beaten path ones are probably not American. I think
I know Australians and New Zealanders. Some contact back and forth. They're out doing things that are pretty amazing, but without any.
No fanfare.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You will never hear about it. They do it because they do it. So it's a different concept. But the thing too, it's a whole different age now. When Bill and I did the Gobi, no one had done that at all, anywhere near it before. We had to figure that one out. Just what are we going to face there? Then and regulations and so forth, and there was no way to ask anyone because no one had been anywhere near doing that. And so then also with the Sahara, how are we going to get through these 7 countries and still live? Fortunately, there was a man in Morocco who knew the desert from one end to the other, and he became our advisor. Without him, we couldn't have done it. And then it was just a matter of inventing the way, figuring it out. So really, you're going out there as a sort of a pioneer. It's a very different to what I see now is all those, you might say, all those firsts are gone. Now people are out there inventing reasons to be first. The first diabetic, the first person with one arm, or the first person with whatever. Somebody told me well, why don't you go out and you'd be the first person with hip replacement? Well, I find that the most uninteresting reason to do anything. I never think about it, and I really don't care.
Well, I'm of two minds of it, personally and in reflecting on you. And that is, sure, I could do things quietly. And in some ways, I would prefer to do that because I am so tired of social media and quote unquote having to post about things. I just think, do I really want to spend the time? I'm not on Twitter and I'm not on some of these other social media platforms. And I think, I'm just so tired of doing that. But on the other hand, I do feel a responsibility to do that. And I think that when I look at you, this is a judgment I'm going to make. I feel like you have a responsibility to tell people also. And I have a responsibility to bring your story to people because when somebody hears your story or with a hip replacement and that you're 81 years old and you started to walk across the desert at 80, or they hear my story that I ran my first marathon at 50, they start to think, what is possible for me? Because
that's a good point.
These are people who are not necessarily mentors, but we are forging
examples.
Exactly. We are examples
that's
of
what
what's
I find
possible.
In my motivational speaking. That's why I realize now, and by the way, the one hip replacement turned out to be two, because I smashed one hip and damaged the other. And I walked across the Gobi with the one damaged from it took a long time from the Antarctic thing. And I walked across the Gobi with the other and finally had that replaced. But it all came from that one crevasse. So, but that's just a side. But no, in my motivational speaking now, I find that I am an example of someone in the 80s who can go out and do these things, and perhaps, hopefully, in my motivational speaking, I tell us they choose which program. I have 7 different programs. They choose which one they want, but I don't tell that program, oh, here I am, this wonderful person who did this wonderful thing and was first. That's all inconsequential to me. What I really want to tell my audience is, okay, this is what I did, but because we're all created equal, then you can choose your goals and you could go out and do whatever you want. I chose a goal, I planned well, and I went for it. You can do the same. And I don't deserve to be on any pedestal. You can do just as many things as you want as I have done.
Do you think that you reach people?
Yeah, I do.
Do they?
Oh, I do.
Do they get back to you and they say,
very
because
much
of
so.
you, I did X?
Yes. I've had, just the other day, a typical email, a lady from New York. I did a commencement speech for university in Las Vegas last year, and I think it's my best commencement speech I've ever made. I was very happy with it. It was sort of like beyond my best. I just got off the stage. I thought, gosh, was that really me? But anyway, it was.
Was it videotaped?
Yes, it's on my website.
Good.
You can go onto my website.
I'll link to it in the show notes.
I talked about, always look forward, never look back. Keep going forward. Plan, set goals, plan, go forward. Never look back. Keep going. And this woman from New York, I've had lots of response from that, but over the years I've had a lot of response. But I'm getting more and more now. It's more like a flood coming in now. Whenever I speak, people are getting back to me every time now. And this woman from New York, she said, "You changed my life." When I heard that, I knew I could do it. I knew I could change my life, because she had some very difficult things in her life she had to overcome. She said, "I've overcome them, and I'm moving on. And you're the one that changed my life." And I get a lot of that now. The words, "you changed my life." I'm hearing that a lot now. So that's why I'm thinking now at 80 plus, I'm 81 now. It seemed that the day I turned 80, I became more useful to society. And I see myself as being more useful now. After all, there have been times gone by, if you ever hit 80, well, you would be lucky. There are some people who look at me now and it's almost an offence to them that I'm alive. At 80, shouldn't you be dead, sort of thing. And so people are inspired by the fact that, gee, look at you. You can go, age doesn't matter. It's what you want to do and how you live your life and what you can do. And if you can do it, and a good thing is I'm only 5'3", and I'm not this big 6 foot person walking on stage, and I'm not 30, 40 years old. If I was 30, 40 years old or even 50 anymore and I'm 6 foot, people say, oh, well, she can do that. Look at her. She's big enough to do it, to fight an elephant all by herself and scare the lions away. And my goodness, she's young anyway. But now I walk on stage and she's over 80 years old. She's only 5'3", and people say to me, we thought you'd be a lot bigger.
I hear that all the time. I thought you were a lot taller. I'm like, no, I just look like that on my website. Yeah.
And so I can see the usefulness that I am now. And this is why Adventure Classroom is becoming more important to me now. And I'm working very hard along with the webmaster to it's all going to be updated. The whole website's going to be updated and a lot more information, and also to not only inspire students but adults who will go on to that. I get a lot of people going onto my website just to read about. It's just, I see myself as just being more useful to society.
I think there's two ways to approach. I think there's many ways to approach everything, but I view it as there's two ways to approach and age, whatever that age is. And as I was approaching 50, I've never been one to look at a decade or look at a milestone birthday, as they call it, and freak out over it. And so as I was approaching 50, I thought, okay, I'm halfway there. That was my attitude. And I'm 53 now. And as I was approaching that, I thought, okay, I'm halfway there. And as it got closer, and maybe even as I turned 50, I had about 2 minutes where I thought, oh shit, I'm 50. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to say, how can I, rather than this being on the downhill,
celebrate your age.
Yeah, absolutely. What can I do that I never thought that I could do? And so it's just a little bit of a switch of the mind. And I think that if everybody could look at whatever the age, because now, and I'm thinking the same thing, I'm more inspirational now than I was 10 years ago.
Oh, yes.
And I look at, because I did have a moment where I thought, oh gosh, there's all these younger women in the travel business who are making their inroads and making their influence, having their influence and that sort of thing for that 20, 30 something year old, for that whole crowd. What's my place? And then I just realized, oh yeah, my place is celebrating that I'm 50.
You celebrate your age, and you are an inspiration to the younger age because you have knowledge that they have yet to learn.
Right.
You see, now at 81 years old, when I think back to when I was 50, well, I thought I was a woman of the world at 50. After all, I'd skied to the North Pole. Well, excuse me, no. I knew very little to what I know now. I know more about out there and what I have to do to survive. And you just walk in Death Valley. They do lose people most years down in Death Valley because of the heat and the thirst and so forth. And so you've got to know. But as we get older, we gain in knowledge, and that knowledge can be used to help younger people. And then, and I'm finding now that I've got college students looking up to me, sending me emails, asking me for advice on how to plan, on how to do this. And what they're doing is they're recognizing this woman, she's over 80 years old. Good grief, she must have learned something in her life because she's survived this long and with the things she's doing. So they're asking me advice on many different things. And so I'm seeing that getting older, I don't think I will ever regret getting older, even to the day I die, because as I grow older, I grow as a person, I learn more, and I'm just as happy as can be to pass that on to others. And I love I just enjoy my the things that I do as a motivational speaker. I just love audiences, and it's just I love audiences so that I just feel so good about imparting what I've done. Not because, oh, look at me, I'm first. That's not it. It's look what I've done at that age. I was 50 when I did that, and then I'm 80 now as I did this. You see this, you can do it. You can do it. And I point out to them that, we're all the same. I am no better than you. I just chose my path early, and I pushed myself along, and I found a way to make things work. You can do the same. And people are nodding their heads. Yeah, suddenly I could see the audience is real. Even the men who tend to be a bit more stoic, I see their heads nodding. Yeah, really, I could do that too. Yeah, I could see that. And I'm getting now... in the old days, men would look at you like, oh, yeah. But now I find the men are looking at me as a mentor. They can see, well, she's a woman. She's not very big. And look what she can do. Well, I can do anything I want to as well.
Well, what do you think is the factor that stops people, or the factors? What do you think it is?
Low expectation.
What do you mean by that? Oh,
they just don't understand how good they are. They don't understand
what they're capable of.
No, they've got this great mind and this brain that they're not using. They only use a teeny weeny part of it. And they've got this wonderful brain. They need to use more of it. And if they would get into a fitness program and reasonable healthy eating, they could feel better. They could get out and do things. Or they can do intellectual things. You don't have to go out and conquer the poles and do the Amazon and all these things. You can be an academic, and you can do wonderful things to inspire through your academic efforts. You can invent things. You can write things. You can compose music, or you can do all sorts of things.
What do you do to keep your brain healthy?
Well, just what I do, I guess. Just keep setting goals. I'm definitely goal and challenge oriented. I love a good challenge. I love something that I can sink my teeth into and figure out how to do it. See, that's why the South Pole does not appeal to me whatsoever anymore. Even though I was offered full sponsorship a short time ago to go. They thought it would be so neat for an 80-year-old. I said, yeah, that would be very neat and very inspirational, but I can inspire people through other ways. But to do that, I'm not, it's not a challenge. I mean, it's already been figured out for me, and they'll lay it all out for me, and I have to follow all this, and I've got to be in contact every day. I don't want to, when I go on something, I don't want to talk to you. I will tell you when I finish. Even when I did Death Valley. Oh, well, make sure that you send texts, and make sure you let us know every day. But in the national parks, it's a dead area. You can't get anything out.
Yeah, good for you.
This was wonderful. And that silly cell phone, it was back at base. Not that I have anything against cell phones, are very handy. They're good to have, but I make sure when I'm driving, I have one in the car. If something happens, I can get on the phone.
But you want to be offline, yeah. I think a lot about brain health, and I think about specifically, I'm very tuned into my daily energy level, and I think that a lot of my choices during the day specifically have to do with what's going on in my brain. I think it's a new science, for one, that's coming out, and like new information that's coming out. But I also think that I just don't think enough people are aware of it. And so I think about, I'm tired. Okay. Then I think, how did I sleep last night? What did I have for breakfast, or what did I have for dinner last night? And how is that affecting me? Not just my body, but whether it's the glucose in my brain, or it's just the brain fog. And I'm constantly trying to, rather than just fine tune my machine, I'm trying to fine tune my mind. And whether that is through diet, because diet is going to affect what's going on in my mind. The sugar we talked about before we started recording, sugar, alcohol, caffeine, all of that. I play around with caffeine because I'm not a huge caffeine drinker, but I know when I do have it, I am like on top of the world. It's like the best thing ever.
I love the smell of coffee, but I hate the taste. But if I do drink, it's like Whoa, gee. Yeah.
Now I know why everybody's hooked.
Yeah. It's like, gosh, I see why they take caffeine. I even have a friend, she has a little bottle of caffeine pills in the car with her, so she gets sleepy. She just pops like only half. She just does half, though.
And it works.
Yes. Just a little bit. So anyway, I'm not too sure about those things, but, speaking of the mind, I think one of the most stimulating things to move us along, and I hope I impart this through my motivational speaking to my audiences, but speaking to people. Now, for instance, speaking to you, I find this is the kind of conversation I like. And in fact, somebody was talking to me the other night who wants to video all my programs and so forth, and she was telling me she's a trainer and a weight loss clinic person and all those sorts of things that she works with people. And I was telling her, she was asking me, well, what sort of conversation do you get the most stimulation from? And I said, you don't ever ask me to go shopping at the mall. And I can't do it. I'm bored to death.
It puts me to sleep. I think that there's something in the air there.
I just get plain crotchety and I want to go home. And it's like if I go shopping and I have a list and I've got to go to 2 or 3 places, I won't make it all the way. So I have to forget this. I've done Target store. Oh my gosh, so many people. Let me get in the car and go home to my farm. But I find in-depth conversation stimulating very often, and men are more likely to get into those conversations than women. And I have many women friends like yourself. I could see a conversation with you. We're getting into some good in-depth stuff that's making us think and making us feed off each other to some extent. I'm listening to you and I'm listening to your concept of life. I find that very stimulating. And when you're gone, I'm going to be thinking about that. She's a vegan. Yeah, I do eat a bit of meat. I wonder if I could cut down on that a bit more. And it makes me think. Now, this is making the brain move. It's making me think out of the box, because now I'm thinking about what you said. Oh, what Beth said, and she said this about that, and this sort of thing. And I find that very stimulating, and that's food to keep you moving, rather than, I have some lovely girlfriends. I mean, they're just delightful people, and some of them just love to shop at the mall. Well, they know now. Don't ask Helen. She just want to go home. She'll never make it to lunch. She's going to want to go home. Well, that's not too good. I can't do that to and they're such dear people. But it's just that I just rather enjoy sitting down with a good, solid conversation. You might disagree like crazy on politics, but you'll have a good conversation, and I'll hear your view, because your view could be opposite to mine, but I want to hear it, because I then will be able to expand my view through your knowledge. It doesn't allow me to be that narrow. I don't, you see people, I know people who are so narrow in their thinking. They never think out of the box. They're on the one. They don't even travel a normal railroad line because they're only on one track. They've only got one wheel going. It's so narrow. And I find that both boring, and it's not informing me of anything. And so I think if we feed off each other in conversation, learn what the other. I love to ask people, what do you do for a living? Or what did you retire from? Or I want to know. And I love to ask. When I meet people for the first time, I always ask them those questions. I want to know what you do.
I always ask people what they do for fun.
Yeah, well, I ask, what did you do? What did you retire from? Or what is your job? Or where do you live? Or why do you live there? I don't care about me. I want to know about you. Because if we're going to talk about me all the time, I'm not going to learn a darn thing. I already know about me and all my faults. I want to know about you. And I find that to be very stimulating. And I think if we spread our minds out to take in the other guy's point of view, and don't be mad at them if they don't think the same politics or the same religion as you, it's good to meet different people. It's like when we're going across the Gobi, we're Christians, but we learnt a lot about the Buddhist religion. I actually came back and gave a little speech in my Christian church and said, in many ways, if we Christians behaved a bit more like Buddhists in some ways, we'd be a lot better Christians. And everybody went, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Jaws dropped. Yeah, but I didn't care. It was my thought and Bill's thought too. It was, it opened our minds.
Well, I think thank you for the compliments there, and this is such a lovely, fantastic conversation, I believe as well. I do struggle with my own narrow-mindedness and my own judgment about
we all
people
have that.
And about how people live, and I struggle sometimes with who I might ask to be on the podcast too, because I think this may not align exactly with my values. I've got somebody coming up, hopefully in the coming months or so, that I'll be recording with that fits into that category of, I've struggled with it. And I thought, you're just being closed-minded if you're not open to having this person on the podcast.
Listen to all points of view, because only if you listen to, it's for instance, in the world of politics, there's a channel Fox, and then there's CNN. Well, they're both highly biased to their own point of view. But I cannot see how anyone can vote correctly and intelligently if you only listen to one, because you don't hear the other guy's point of view. So Bill and I have always gone back and forth.
Well, that's because I know the other point of view is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where we become, and all of us are guilty of being narrow-minded on some things. Oh, yes. I've always been very careful about, in fact, I was raised that way. I mean, when I was very young, well, don't be so narrow-minded. I want you to think about it in another way. That was a common expression in the household as I grew up. And to be narrow-minded was, you would never want to be that way.
Yeah.
Mother and Dad are not going to ever approve of that. And so, I think that to listen to other people without judgment, listen instead to gain from them. And that's what I try to impart in my motivational speaking. You can hear my story, be motivated by what I did, but I want you to be motivated by the fact that you too are special. You are special. You can do it. And whatever you set your mind out to, you can do anything you want to. Just go out and get it done and think out of the box.
All the stories that we tell ourselves, the reasons why we can't do something, we have to just be aware of that, because I think a lot of times we're not even aware that we're telling ourselves a story. Oh, yeah. And we just have to stop it.
Well, we're being negative to ourselves.
Yes.
And that's shutting down the brain, thinking out of the box. It's thinking about, there's so many ways. I'm just so happy that somehow I got into this. When I skied to the pole, it changed things a lot for me, hugely. I see at that point, I didn't do it. Now, I know that these days people go off and do something. They're going to be the first because of such and such to do such and such, because they have grand ideas that they'll be a motivational speaker, make a lot of money. They'll make a lot of money because of the book. They don't understand that they're really not a good speaker, and they've never written a book in their life and probably never will.
And most books don't sell more than 100 copies.
No. So it's not looking at reality. But when I went to the pole, I never knew I'd write a book. I like to write, but that doesn't mean to say you can write a book. So I realized, as my family later convinced me that I should try writing a book. So I said, okay. Well, I started out really to keep people quiet. Just leave me alone. I'll start on this thing, and then you see it doesn't work, and then you'll know I'm right. Okay, well, it turned out to be a bestseller, and it still does well. Even it came out in 93, and it's still doing well.
Is that Polar Dream?
Yes, Polar Dream. And so then, it was a Rotary Club asked me to tell them about my journey, and I thought, well, I guess I will. They free lunch and everything. That'll be all right. So off I went, and I had slides, with the old projector and so forth. And I thought, and they were very pleased. And I took my dog, Charlie, and they just loved Charlie. And I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. So then 2 or 3 more Rotaries, they were calling me, and I was speaking to them. And then somebody said to me, well, they don't pay anything. I said, no, of course not. I just do it just because it's fun. They said, well, you could be paid for it, you know. I said, pay? You get paid to just stand up there and talk? And I thought, well, that's...
And talk about yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so then I thought, I could see a way of, if I could make this work, I could see a way of supporting Adventure Classroom, because I was looking for corporate sponsorship, I'm not a fundraiser. I feel as though I'm out there begging for money, and that's not my... No. If you say no to me once, well, goodbye, I didn't want to talk to you at the beginning anyway. And so Miss Independent will storm off, you know, and leaving the poor CEO in his leather chair wondering, what was that? So then, suddenly then things changed, and the schools were paying me a fee. I didn't know that ever happened. And then I was getting into more and more schools all the time, K through 12, and then colleges. And then corporate America started calling me. And so then it was that now, of course, then from then on and until now, and we'll continue to do so, all my speaking fees and all my book revenue goes into Adventure Classroom. I don't go out and ask anybody for any money. I work for it, which it gives me a great deal of satisfaction as well. So... But that changed my life, just being bold enough to go out and do something where I had to basically reinvent the wheel to get it done, because there was no one to ask. There was no one. It just didn't exist. The sled didn't exist even.
So you grew up on a farm, and I have a theory that I'm sure so much of the population, so many people out there already know, but it's something that I learned relatively recently, is that people who grew up on farms know how to fix things. They know how to cobble things together when they're broken, or to figure out how to make things
how to make it go
work. Yeah, exactly. Would you say that that's the case for you? Is that kind of growing up on this farm, is that the repairman isn't just a phone call away? You have to figure it out yourself.
Exactly.
So that's exactly how.
Yeah, like on the farm we had 10,000 acres, and it was a sheep, dairy, and cattle sections, and it was a very profitable farm. And in New Zealand, it's not desert. It's very, the animals are ankle deep in clover, you know, it's very lush. But my dad was a superb fix-it person. He could fix anything. He was a great manager as well. He had 50 employees on the farm, and at one point he had foot operation. He just turned the whole place. When I was just a teenager, I was only 18, he said, the place is yours. 6 months, your boss. Everything. It's all, I've taught you enough over the years. You're the manager. So I did that. And that was a huge experience for me, of managing 50 employees and an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah,
you know.
Of course.
I had one or two say, well, you know, you're the farmer's daughter, you know, the boss's daughter. We don't know. And I learned to stand up on my own 2 feet and say, excuse me, I'm the boss. I can also fire you. I did fire one. And then he begged to come back again, because he said, I made a terrible mistake. I took him back. Boy, did I feel superior.
At 18.
At 18. But it was a great learning. My dad knew what he was doing. And, I'd be out there and he'd be fixing something and I'd be out there fiddling around with it. And because I was very outdoor, and my mother would have trouble having me clean my room, but Dad never had any trouble in getting me out on the farm.
Do you have siblings?
No. I guess they saw me and said, don't want any more of those. Maybe just as well. And so...
I think it's probably more of, we're going to perfect this one.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know if we can. Yeah. What do we do with this?
Yeah.
Because my parents kept telling stories about when I was very small, apparently. You know, the baby cot and the rail. I would walk around it like tightrope, and I tore all the curtains off the window.
Holding on to it. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I just ripped them all off. So I guess it was... And I climbed trees at a way too young age, and then they caught me once out with the dirt, and I was catching worms and cutting them up, mixing them with dirt and eating it.
Oh, geez.
Like this child. So you can see why they only had one.
I can see. Yeah. And what, you were 4 or 5 climbing trees?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. I was climbing like a monkey. So I can see why they only had one. Why would you have 2 of that?
Maybe to temper it a little bit.
Yeah, something around that. But going to the pole changed my life. It turned me into things I never knew I would be, a motivational speaker and a writer.
And that was when you were 50?
50, yeah. Yeah, you know, I didn't tell people up at base camp I was 50, because I knew that they would tell me I shouldn't be doing it, so I kept my age secret. And because I looked a lot younger than I really was, I afterwards I told them I was 50, and they were shocked. But I felt that point up there at base camp. I had to, among the Inuit, I had to keep it very quiet because they'd start telling me not to do it.
But before the trek, before you left.
Yeah, but afterwards it was okay because I've done it now. You can't tell me not to do it because I've done it.
And then you could thumb your nose at them.
Yeah, you sort of, yes, I did it. But it's been I would say the road I've travelled, I'm happy with it. I want to improve that road. I want to put myself in a position to inspire people to know that they can do it. That people need that. We need to encourage. And I have a need to be. I was sort of a caretaker at heart as well, which is why I rescued because I lost my husband, my soulmate for 55 years, and a hiking partner. So I rescued Sam, a very abused, wonderful dog, German Shepherd Golden Retriever, and to travel with him now, I have something to care about, to care for. Stop for the water, and I was going past 395 past Reno. Well, he fussed a bit. He needed water. Okay, I pulled off to the side. The traffic's flying by. Okay, he has this water, fine. Well, down there, 5 miles down the road, he doesn't do the same thing. No one wants to go wee-wee. I said, why didn't you do it back there when we had the water? And I think, well, I'm talking to him like my child. Well, I guess he really is my child. But I could feel the satisfaction in caring about something. I can care about something. Just to go, see, when I went down to Death Valley the first time, it was the first road trip I'd taken without Bill. I was so sad going down. I cried a lot of the way. But then, you got to, you do that and then you get over it. Just move on. These losses, you never tell people to get over it. You work through it. And so when you find the tears come or the down day comes because you're missing your soulmate, now I'm not going to get over it, losing him. I never will. I even have his ring. I have them both joined. But you work through it. So instead of the tears, what do? And doing the hike without Bill, this isn't working. I came home, went on the internet. I went onto a rescue site and consequently got Sam. And so he was only 1.5 years old when I got him. He'd been terribly abused, even shot. And so something to care for. So there's something of a caretaker, and I guess that's why I really want to motivate people to know that you can get out there and do things. I am not any more special than you are. I am not.
And it's very much about having a goal, having a purpose.
A purpose in life. I want to have a purpose in life till the day I die. I want to see now this National Parks project is great. As I walked Death Valley, I hit a period of food poisoning in the middle of it. And there's always something in an expedition, something is going to happen. And so sure enough, my day food went moldy and I didn't realize, and I was eating this. And I got a very bad case of food poisoning. I had a temperature of 104.
Ooh.
Anyway, I got up that morning and I was vomiting and I was sick. And I thought, oh boy, I'm not going to stop. I have planned for this. I'm not stopping now. I've got to find the end of this Death Valley. Anyway, I struggled on and I'd taken my temperature, it was 104, and that was a bit depressing. But I thought, oh, well, my attitude of something like that, just try to ignore it, and then it might not exist. Anyway, I'm on this rock, and on this very, very crude backcountry road, the road is name only, and here comes this four-wheel Jeep barreling along. It was a doctor and his wife exploring the backcountry, very adventuresome couple. In this Jeep, they arrived in this cloud of dust, rattling and banging along, and stopped, and they could see I was in trouble. And it turned out he was a doctor. He took my temperature, of course, being a doctor, 104. Well, right away, we've got to turn around and get you to a hospital. You can't be out here. This is desolate. There's no water out here. It's getting too hot. It's in the 90s, and you got to get out of here. And I said, no, just wait a minute now. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to plod on, And it's one step at a time. We'll do it. I know it. I've done this thing. I've done it a lot of times in my life, one step at a time. And I keep thinking of remember the 2 lessons I learned on that mountain when I was 9 years old? I told him about that. I said that lesson's gone all through my life, one step at a time. And I keep thinking of the end. That's my prize. And that will pull me on. And he said, all right, then we'll leave you as long as you promise that if they're going to go up in the back country, we'll come back, if, you feel like you can't, we'll take you. I said, okay. So he took off. So I went, and what I did, I just fixed my gaze 100 feet or so ahead, and I walked to it, another 100 feet, and I went on like that for 4 days. Because, and he did say, well, you're not going to get over this quickly because you insist on going on. I said, I know, but, it might take me a bit longer, but I just want to get to the end of this thing. I want to walk this. And he asked me how old I was. He said, you're kidding. He said, your age alone, you shouldn't be doing this. So I said, don't ever say, I said, you're a doctor. I said, and I told him, through this kind of haze I was in now because I was really sick, I said, you're a doctor. You have a responsible to inspire people. And your 80-year-old patients, do you tell them all that they can't do things? He said, no, ma'am. And he said, no, ma'am. And I said, well, you just think about it. And anyway.
Boy, you taught him a lesson, didn't you?
When he came back, he stopped. And I said, I'm going on. He said, my wife and I have been thinking about you, and he said, you need to take up motivational speaking. He said, you could really get people moving, because he said, I changed a lot. He said, when you saw me the first time, I am now a different person. And he said, and his wife was saying, yeah, he really got pretty deep into what you said. He said, and she said, I'm thinking the same thing. And so off they went happy. But he said, you need to take up motivational speaking. You would be really good at it.
You said, dude, look me up on the internet.
I told him about my website.
Yeah.
I always have a little card with me. I said, here's my card. So he probably did look at it.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah. And also on that, I met, that was funny. I met one lady. She, farther on, after I was over took me actually 6 days to get completely over the food poisoning, and the first 4 days were just dreadful. Anyway, I met this woman. She was on a bicycle on this rutted path. She was barely able to keep up on her bike because it was such bad surface. And she stopped, and she'd been crying. So I could see something. So I said, well, I got the time. Let's just sit down. I said, I'm just trying to get to the end of this journey, but, let's talk. What's going on? I want to talk about this thing. So she'd had a very bad marriage where her husband had walked out on her for a younger model, and she was going on about how bad she must be, and she was really down on herself. So we talked there for 2 hours, just sitting on the rocks, just talking about it. And anyway, afterwards I got an email back from her. She said, another one, you changed my life. I realized that no, I wasn't at fault. I'm okay. And she's enrolled herself in college, and she's going for a biology degree now. So, things happen. Even if another guy from Germany, he saw the double ring, and he wanted to know about that. And I told him, and he said, I've been living with my girlfriend for 20 years in Germany. And he said, I think we need to marry and get the identical rings so that when one goes, they could do like you did. That really appealed to him. And so we talked about it, and talked about, my marriage. And he said, do you think that we should marry? And I said, well, hey, that's not for me to say. You have to make that decision yourself. But, you don't even have to be married, and you could still have rings. Anyway, he emailed. So then he found me the next day. He was on a motorcycle, and he found me the next day. And how he ever got that motorcycle across that rough terrain, but anyway, he did. And he said, I emailed her, and she said, yes, we're going to marry. So then when I got home, he emailed me again, and yeah, they married, and he said, we've got identical rings. And he's a photographer, and he showed the photo of each one with their fingers like they have the rings. One day will be joined. Aww. So here I'm doing some marriage counseling along my way, and he on his last email, he said, you should take up motivational speaking. So apparently I'm able to.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
But I find that is so much fun.
Yeah.
But you see now, in speaking to each of those people, I learned something from them. See, I drew something from them. You just keep drawing from people all around you. It's like there's your energy field, if you allow it. But if you are very, very narrow-minded, well, vegan, ridiculous. Wearing a lot of beautiful bracelets.
Oh, yeah.
No,
yeah,
would never
yeah.
be me. Whereas, they're beautiful. Now, that's why I asked. I
About
wanted to
my
know,
bracelets.
I want to know what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
Find out what they mean.
Right.
Don't just look at them. Find out what they mean, and you pull off all of that. Now, I wish I had done the same thing. That would have been
It's never
nice.
too late. What are you talking about?
No, I think I will
on your
start
next
on
trip.
that. Yes.
Yeah. For listeners, I've got bands of just woven and some beaded bracelets, and I actually super glue them on so that they don't come off, and unless they just get so thin that they have to come off. So I wait for them to fall off, and then I add another one.
I'm going to start that. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I see now my project now, which is going to last me for the rest of my life. I'm going to go to the national parks of America. I discovered that through Adventure Classroom. School districts throughout the country do not put it on the curriculum because of, no room. And so
teaching about the national parks.
Yes, teaching about,
yeah.
yes. But teachers can download from Adventure Classroom and they can read books. And so I am going to visit the national. I start off with Death Valley, and I've just completed Joshua National Park in Southern California. And I'm going to go to each park, and I do the research, the geography, geology, history, flora, fauna, the whole thing. And then I write also up. It's a section on my journey through that park with my dog Sam. Then so that'll all go on Adventure Classroom. That's all ready to be downloaded. You'll learn everything you ever wanted to know about that particular park. In addition to that, I will write a children's book at the 6th grade level. And Sam will tell the kids the story of that particular park. So that's, and I'm really excited about that because see, now I get to,
now you have a literally a lifelong goal.
I do, and I just keep going one after. So I just got back from Joshua Tree National Park. I'm already planning for the next Sahara National Park in the Sonoran Desert, and I've hiked many of these places with Bill. So I'm going to do that. So that's exciting. And something else will crop up in there somewhere. But right now, it's expanding Adventure Classroom website. My webmaster is going to redesign the whole website and and I want to expand. My husband and I, we lived with many indigenous cultures in various parts of the world. I want to expand the section on each of those cultures and then bring the parks into this as well. And the National Park Service, the superintendents that I've spoken to are really excited because they said we need more knowledge out there and we need more support. And so because the more support, the more people come, the more money, and they can, because budgets are very tough right now. So that's my goal. That's my motivational speaking.
Yeah, you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, it's the speaking and the photography, the National Park project, and the writing. And I want to get the Sahara book written. So, yeah,
you're behind on all 6 projects,
of course,
as you said.
It's my whole life. I'm always behind 6 projects behind myself.
Yeah,
which is exciting to me because it's a wonderful reason to get up in the morning because I have to get up and get these things done. And it's not a stress thing. It's just it's exciting about life. And then I meet interesting people like you, and I think about what some of the things that you've said, and think, I think that's something I could incorporate a little bit, and I could do this and I could do that.
Well, you've certainly inspired me. As we just wrap up here, I will say that right before we started recording, I mentioned to you my goals for the next year and a half. And listeners, I apologize. I know you've heard this many times, but the Epic 5 runs in September, and then the 4 deserts coming up next year.
What are the 4 deserts? Excuse me.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's the Namib.
Oh, yes.
Is the first one.
Yes.
The Gobi, the Atacama, and Antarctica.
And which part of the Gobi are you going to do?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
And how far will you go?
Each of them is 250 kilometers, 155 miles.
Yeah, our journey across the Gobi, we walked 1,600 miles
all
the way from west to east. We went probably about 50 miles farther to make sure we covered the whole desert, so somebody can't say, well, you didn't get the whole way. So that's interesting. I was interested to know what part of you would be.
I have to go check the route.
We were right down on the Chinese border to get down to the very remote part because we wanted to experience the lifestyle of the nomads. And we accidentally crossed into China once, and that was a oops because we were just about shot. But we got away from that too. Did another little episode, but that'll be fun. You're like the people are wonderful.
You see, you're the first person to say that, and this is what I was getting to, is to say something like, it'll be fun, or that's just brilliant, or that's just great.
You're going to love it.
Because everyone else is saying that sounds awful. That sounds like torture.
No, you're going to love it. And you know, the many reasons you're going to like the Gobi is now, if you read my book, Walking the Gobi, you'll find that I've spoken about the people and how wonderful they are, and truly they are wonderful people. You will love them, and you'll also like the desert.
Oh,
it's
sure.
Different. It's very different. The Antarctica, well, I found my journey was, well, of course, other than going into the crevasse and the last miles, was my hip and so forth. That was a little bit different, but I was so bored up to that point. You see, I'd come from the Arctic and with the polar bears and doing my best not to fall through the ice into the ocean. And here, I just put one foot, because I put a foot into the crevasse. But even that, in the Antarctic, I hope that you'll be able to experience that they don't have you so structured, that somehow you can experience the total aloneness of the place. There's this great wide open place, and there's just you. Maybe if you can run away from the other people a little bit, go so fast you're way ahead of them, and you'll experience this total, just me. I'm the only person in this whole world. That's a very special feeling. Now, and of course in Namibia, that'd be fun. That's a desert where you'll get sand.
Right.
You'll get sand in your shoes, and so it's going to be a great project because you get. It's so much contrast. Really, that is, yeah. But, and somehow going out and testing the inner self, not only mentally but physically, and getting tired. And just, at the end of the day, that's why I don't do media at the end of the day.
And just having to get up and do that physical thing the next day.
Get up
again.
Getting out of the tent in the morning is one of the hardest things. And that's when you can even have moments of slight depression of, I've got to get out of the tent and do this all over again. And on and on and on, especially in the Arctic to the pole. I had to constantly think of the polar bears. I had to constantly think of reading the ice. So I didn't go through the ice into the ocean because being alone, it would not have been a very survivable situation. I do have a friend who tried the journey and didn't make it. She went through the ice and disappeared, sled and all, under the ice.
Oh, no.
Just as though she disappeared. They saw her tracks go up to a water lead and nothing.
Oh.
Yeah, it was awful. And so, there's more to think about. At the same time, you at the end of the day, there's something about being so tired. You just, you hardly even want to get any food. That's why I'm not a very good camp food. You don't want to ever be with me. If you think I'm going to cook for you, forget it. I just eat raw oatmeal and a bit of water. I don't care. I eat to survive. I don't eat to enjoy it. I don't care about that. And so if you wanted me to cook for you,
okay,
you'd have to find a cook.
I'll check you off the list then.
Yeah, just take me off the list.
So I trekked through Bhutan 25 days. I've done it twice. I've done the snowman trek in Bhutan, which is 25 days, 24 nights in a tent. And it's that same thing. Each day, about 8 to 13 miles, you're trekking with a couple of rest days. But it's that same thing of knowing that the next day, even though the scenery changes, the next day you have to get up and do the same thing.
The physical part is going to be the same. But then there's something about, I put in a good solid day, I'm tired, and get out and eat whatever you have, collapse into your sleeping bag and sleep it off, and not think about the next morning too much, because that is the hardest part.
Just be warm in your sleeping bag and get up
it's
the
so
next
good
day.
just to climb in there and the relief. But then once you get out of the tent and you look around and take a few deep
warm up
breaths,
a little bit.
Yeah, and then you get going, you're okay. But there's that feeling. But that's part of the challenge.
Yeah,
overcoming
absolutely.
that.
I think it's the mental.
Yeah.
I think that's
totally mental.
Yeah, but I think that's the biggest challenge is the mental hurdle.
Yeah,
that's why I'm so interested in brain health and that,
Yes.
and keeping the brain.
Keep it
the
going.
mental aspect.
And also, when you get out of that tent, deliberately think of something positive. Don't allow yourself to dwell on, oh boy, another day of toil, same old thing. You can't allow that to creep in. You've got to get out of your tent. And even if you feel like you're lying through your teeth to yourself, boy, what a great day this is. I'm off and I'm going again. I'll be even better today than I was yesterday. And think about the end result.
And you don't even have to be, it doesn't even have to be an expedition.
No.
I think a lot of people have that problem every day, getting
day,
out of bed.
yeah.
What am I going to do today?
Even a job you don't particularly like.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I got to get to the office again today. Oh, what a drag! It's not Friday yet, but that's really destructive thinking. You've got to get away, and that's harder than. I mean, I realise that's a lot. It's easy to say these things, but you've really got to take yourself by the neck and say, hey, I'm going to do this. And okay, let me see the office. Well, what's something good about the office? Well, I think I'll take a little potted plant with me today to stick it on my desk. Or maybe I'll take a flower or something. I'll do something or other to get me.
Or bring donuts for the coworkers.
Do something for somebody. Like Bill, my husband, always said, make your own oasis in life and do something nice for other people once a week, and you got it about made. And I try to follow that. I like to think that through my motivational speaking and my books and Adventure Classroom, maybe I wanted to give me an opportunity to do something for other people, because when I do something for somebody else, I always get something from them because I'm motivated by something. Even somebody who's going through something very sad and they're struggling, the fact that they're still standing on 2 feet and they're fighting through that awful happening, that's inspiring to me.
I do find if I'm feeling a little down, I think, okay, what can I do for someone else?
Yeah.
For a neighbor
Think
or
of
for a
somebody
friend.
else other than self.
Yeah.
Because self could get very boring. We need each other. And I think that's, even though I live out here in a very quiet place, I like to do things like that, and my animals, I care for them. I cook their food, and I don't use very much commercial food anymore. I'm afraid of the food coloring.
Yeah.
And
all the processed food's terrible.
And it's like our human food, all that awful processed stuff, and so I cook that, and I take care of the animals and herd the goats back and forth each day. And one dog, he thinks he's a retriever, but he thinks he's a herder, but he's really a retriever. So he doesn't seem to understand that when the goats, they're very tall white goats, they step right over the top of it. But it's all right. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Hey, as we wrap up here, is there anything that we haven't chatted about that you want to cover or mention? And I'll link to all the things that we talked about. I'll link to your website and to Adventure Classroom and all of that.
Mm-hmm. And as that developed more, and also there's a video out that Marlon put out on Death Valley. Marlon is the webmaster, and he's going to do more videos. Actually, what I'm going to do now for him is, as soon as I wrap up the Joshua Tree National Park information for the website, I'm going to do a narration on each of my expeditions, about a 30-minute long narration. He will do that as a voiceover, my photography of that particular expedition.
Oh, that'll be great.
And that will put each one of those on the website. So you'll be able to go to the website and you'll be able to hear me narrate the story of, say, skiing to the pole or living a year with wild wolves above the Arctic Circle. And so I'm going to, and that's exciting to me to do. That's another project that I need to do. So see, I have a lot of things to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
You got to get up 6 o'clock in the morning. You got to get out of bed. There's no time. 5 minutes past 6. I'm late.
Yeah, I know the feeling. And it's HelenThayer.com. Is that that your website?
Yes, that's right. That's my website. It's HelenThayer.com. And then you can link into Adventure adventure classroom from that.
I always end these conversations by asking the guest, what does it mean to you to be bold?
Well, to be bold to me means I can get out, and I'm bold enough to get out and do what I want to do, and bold enough to find a way to do it and overcome all of the obstacles along the way and get to the end result.
Whether that's finding someone at Boeing who can design the sled, and somebody else who can
or
build
live with
the
the Inuit to teach me about the polar bears on the Arctic ice, or in Death Valley, find a way to get down through all of that with no water. What am I going to do about the water? Because I had to carry it all myself, and so 185 pounds. I pulled a cart behind me, 185 pounds. So way, way heavier than I am, but that's what I did. And so, okay, I realized that was going to be heavy. So I trained for it. I just got my legs and hips really, really super, super strong. So you just tailor your body to handle the project ahead. So I would say being bold is just going ahead and finding a way to do it. And even though it seems this might be an impossible task, but I want to do it. So, okay, I will find a way to do it. And with that attitude, you always find a way to do it.
Eye on the prize.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, yes, always. Yes. Yeah.
Helen, thank you so much. I am so delighted that we finally got a chance to sit down and chat. And
it's taken a while to get together, but I'm glad we've done it.
I know. And I hope to spend more time with you, too. This has been fantastic.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah.
When you do each of these others, I want these runs.
Yeah.
Will you contact me and let me know? And,
oh, yeah, of course.
I'd like to be on board as one of your supporters.
Oh, absolutely.
Put me down on your fan list.
Okay, I'll do that.
Because I really want to know. The things I'm going to want to know is how you're doing. I don't care if you're first or last. Mm-hmm. It's how are you doing? What did you see? And what did you learn about your environment? Did you meet people? What were they like? And what did you learn by the end? Then you go do the next one, and then you tell me them. You tell me. Maybe we could do it on your podcast. I could ask you questions.
Okay.
Oh, I got a ton of questions already. I'm ready to go. Yeah. So let's do that. After each one of those, let's get together and I'll ask you questions.
Okay.
That'd be so much fun.
It would
because
be
you
fun.
See now, this is a two-way street. It'll be something on your podcast, but I'm a wee bit selfish here because in asking questions, I'm going to learn things that you discovered.
And I'll talk about things that I
apply them to my experiences.
Yeah. And I'll be able to talk about things that I wouldn't have thought to talk about.
Exactly.
That's what's nice
about it. That's a great project. See, we've already got something else. Here's number 7 project.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks again, Helen. Boy, isn't she inspirational? She's got such an amazing can-do attitude, and really, she leaves me feeling like I can figure out whatever goal it is that is in front of me. Like I could just do anything. It's just a matter of figuring it out, because that's how she has lived her life. Check out her website at helenthayer.com and pick up one of her books, Polar Dream, Walking the Gobi, or 3 Among the Wolves. I'll link to all of them in the show notes. For those links and for links to all the things we chatted about in this episode, go to shesboldpodcast.com/episodes, and there you will find the show notes for this and all of my other conversations. You can also find those links and show notes in whatever podcast app it is you're using to listen to this. Don't forget to check out my Patreon page. Supporters will find out how Helen got herself out of that situation with her smashed hip when she was so close to finishing her walk to the South Pole. You can find out more by going to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. You can also sign up for the She's Bold podcast newsletter from the site's homepage to be alerted each time an episode is released. You can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm Wandergal, and Beth Whitwa on Instagram, BETHWHITWA. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.